Hello,
Hello.
Tally and Farrell here from Board of It, and today we're going to be talking about My City, a game by Dr. Rainer Knizia. It's a legacy tile laying game for between 2 to 4 players. And just to be upfront, this is the quickest turnaround we've ever had between playing a game for the first time and reviewing it. And that is because we have absolutely rinsed My City. We've played all 24 episodes in like about a week or something. And it's one of the most Moorish board game experiences we've ever had. Now, if you know My City and you've been on the fence, that should tell you what you need to know. But if you don't know about My City, Tally is going to tell you more.
My City is a tile laying game in which you'll be building your own city using polyomino building tiles. You'll be covering empty green land spaces whilst trying to avoid covering beautiful oxygen producing trees. So unfortunately, unlike New York Zoo, you can't just cover your entire board with a giant animal or a building. It's split into 8 chapters and each chapter has 3 episodes. The rules start off exceedingly simple and each episode will introduce about 1 to 2 new rules and each chapter new mechanisms. It's impeccably designed, terrifically relaxing, and truly a joyful experience.
Now, like many games, there's some elements we really like, some elements we dislike. We're going to be talking about them. But if you want the short version, it is this. We completed it. We played all 24 episodes. Then we realized that we could actually play quite easily a new campaign online with our friends who just got their own copy because we played 2-player, so we have 2 untouched boards. And this got us so excited by the fact that we could play again with other people. And I think having just finished this, and that's how we feel, that should tell you all you need to know.
Now, this is a legacy game, so our review will contain minor spoilers, although we'll aim to warn you up front before we talk about them in any detail. However, the legacy is just introducing new rules to the gameplay to increase complexity. It's quite an abstract game and the story is non-existent, so it can't really be ruined, so don't worry too much. So after a brief overview of the game, we'll jump right into the discussion.
You begin My City with a green and luscious space of land represented by this board. And let me just say how happy I am that this is an actual board rather than a thin sheet of plastic. You will also have a bunch of polyomino tiles painted to look like buildings that come in 3 colours. And you begin with 10 victory points.
You'll be drawing cards from this deck, which will tell players which building they need to place. There are a few rules to follow, such as you have to start building next to the river. The river cannot be covered by a tile, and a tile has to be placed next to an already built building. You can also skip placing a tile by losing a victory point.
The game will end when either the deck runs out or all players have passed. And you'll then score up with everyone getting 1 point for each visible tree in their city and losing 1 point for each visible empty green space of land and visible rock. And that's it. That's all you need to know to play the first game and My City at its most basic. Obviously, it becomes more and more complex as each episode will add 1 or 2 new rules.
The game is split into 8 chapters, each with 3 episodes. And at the beginning of a new chapter, you'll open up an envelope full of new rules and goodies.
And the state of the board will be changing at the end of each episode, because you'll be very likely altering it in ways that that chapter tells you to. Now, very, very mild spoiler, but as an example, at the end of the very first game of My City, you will be adding either stickers having trees or rocks, depending if you lost or won.
And depending on how well you did, you'll be filling in these progress points, and the player with the most progress points at the end of the campaign will be the overall winner. Let's just get this out the way up front. My City is a brilliant game. By all rights, it should feel kind of stale and boring, particularly if you're usually playing big table hogging games like us. It really doesn't sound like much. You autonomously lay tiles until you personally decide to stop. You're covering up rocks whilst trying to avoid trees. Whatever, snooze. But once again, Dr. Rainer Knizia shows his brilliance.
Yeah, so at its core, My City, it's relaxing, it's soothing, and it is charming. And I actually think it's genius that you have a card that tells you what tile to lay. Because in polyomino games, a lot of times you get a lot of AP because you first have to pick a shape of tile, which one's best, and then you have to decide where to put it. Here, you're presented with a simple problem and you can calmly figure out the solution. Where should I put this specific tile? And the thing is that each of these colors of tiles all have the same shapes. So through repetition, you become familiar with each shape in the game. And this allows you to strategize because you then are able to visualize the board in terms of these shapes and know where to put them in the future.
What really flips the script is obviously the legacy elements. Each chapter adds new mechanisms and each episode adds just 1 or 2 new rules. Thus, there is always a feeling of constant progression and there's always a new consideration in play which makes you think differently than you did in the previous episode. What's amazing is that you hardly notice this increase in difficulty because it's done so masterfully. Chapter 4 feels different in terms of your goals versus Chapter 1, but you'd be hard-pressed to pinpoint the exact moment the game flipped the script on you. Now, there's really not much to criticise about this wonderful experience, although we will cover some things that we think could have been better or that we disliked, but just know that it's a total recommendation from us. We love it. It's just that the nature of this game makes it a little easier to dissect as you can take Chapter 1 and Chapter 3 and compare and contrast what worked and what didn't.
Now we're going to talk about our least favourite part of My City. So unfortunately, there's going to be spoilers for Chapter 3 and very minor abstract spoilers for Chapter 2. So if you want to avoid those, jump ahead. The video is timestamped. But the gimmick in Chapter 3 is this. You have half as much land to build on. Now, this is a legacy game. Each episode you only get to play once and it's gone. The board has changed forever. And when you've completed all the episodes, the game's over. You have to buy a new copy if you want to play it again. This is why we were so disappointed that a major mechanic in a chapter is to play less of the game that you enjoy playing and have paid for. Because there's half as much land, it plays in half as much time, and this is already a lightning quick game. And obviously you run into problems, so you end up passing even sooner than you usually would. And this is compounded by a mechanic introduced in Chapter 2, which was essentially buildings you always have to place, you can't skip them. And one of these buildings is a total beast, and if you've played My City, you know the one I'm talking about. It's horrible. And so what happened is I got caught out very early in an episode of Chapter 3, just because I couldn't place this building. And it's a bit my fault, a bit bad luck. I had plenty of green spaces, couldn't put it. And the fail state for that is the game ends for you. So I was ending a game about, I would say, a minute or 2 into playing, and that episode was then done for me. And this episode is already half the time anyway, right? And then it made it not fun for Tally because what's the point of her playing on? She knows she's won. So yeah, all combined, we just found these mechanics really disappointing and this chapter really disappointing. But the good news is, like a lot in My City, if you don't like it, it's going to be gone pretty soon because of how the progression works. And the thing is, this thing about the buildings and the fail state, that doesn't just be confined to that chapter. It actually happened a few more times. And it's just kind of disappointing that a fail state is to not play the game that you've paid for and you enjoy.
But looking back, it's impressive how different each chapter felt, with almost all of them being equally interesting. Almost all of the new mechanics were innovative and novel, even if how much you like them will vary from person to person. My City takes you on a really interesting journey, and honestly, we would buy another copy of this game so we can play with more players. However, one outlier to this is that at one stage the game takes away a mechanic just to bring it back 2 chapters later in a new hat, masquerading as a new mechanic. And that's a little bit of a shame, given that Most of them were very novel and innovative. That being said, it was different enough not to feel repetitive, and it definitely provided a new puzzle. What we would also say is that it maybe felt a little bit more fun earlier on in the campaign because you're excited to get the envelopes and open them up. That being said, My City does a great job at providing new surprises, and there's always cool stuff and ideas in the envelopes.
One thing that maybe also lessened our enjoyment as the campaign went on was that early on, in the early chapters, a lot of what's introduced changes how you score VP, so you're always kind of on the back foot trying to figure out how now to best score and win. Whereas in the later chapters, a lot of what was introduced, it allows you to get little bonuses and rewards rather than change how you score, and they just kind of felt a bit superfluous at times. I'm the kind of person that when in a game like this, a new mechanic is introduced, I really lean hard into it, I explore it, especially because it's going to be gone very soon. And it just felt like at times I was punished for that. And taking chapter 6 as an example, I went in really hard and tried my best to always max out the mechanism that was introduced, whereas Tally kind of just played the base game and just gave it a passing glance. And when the dust settled and this mechanism was taken out, she had won almost every game, and on the reward side of things, I wasn't that much better off than her. And what was worse and compounded this is that for losing the games and also some of the rewards I was getting from this mechanism, I kept getting a little boost to an earlier mechanism that does allow you to score VP. So I became very good at this one thing, but what was really ironic is that if I did this mechanism, it was at odds with the new mechanism the game was introducing. So I was in this strange place of the game basically saying, look, you can do really well and get a lot of VP and win, but you're not allowed to engage in any way with the mechanism that we've just given you. And as a totally made up example, it would be like if the mechanism had you make a chain of red buildings from the top of the map to the bottom of the map and you got some goodies. But one of the rules in play was that you score if you have a group of red buildings in each corner of the map. And as you can see, you literally can't do both. And that's what it was like for me.
These issues are only minor quibbles though, as the game moves along quickly. And the actual way these mechanisms change up the game is interesting. It's just a shame that sometimes they are disparate from winning. And this is just mild disappointment with the implementation rather than any dislike.
However, one thing we do dislike is the state of My City's rulebook. This is a game that'll have you pick up and drop rules faster than you would a hot oven tray with your bare hands. And you're going to get rules whiplash from trying to remember what is and isn't in play. And this is coming from people that played each chapter with minimal time in between. If you're meeting once a month with a gaming group, you'd likely have to reread every chapter sheet preceding the one you're on.
The first problem is that My City makes the rules so simple that it does leave space for ambiguity, particularly if you're used to big rulebooks where everything is spelled out because it has to be. Things sometimes just aren't specifically stated. The game leaves you to infer, then there's always an aspect of doubt.
Secondly, it seems like they've traded the clarity of having a big official rulebook with everything in it for the fun of getting to pull these rules out of the envelopes every time you start a new chapter. And these rule sheets, they often say literally, and I mean literally this, all rules from episodes 13 to 19 apply. And it's just not true, because you've already been told that all these mechanics from episodes 13 to 15 have been taken out, and you've already covered up spaces on your board that correspond to episodes 16 to 19. And although they do kind of cover it, because in a previous episode it says that these rules are no longer in play, so you could argue that it's covered, I think we can all agree this is a horribly tedious and confusing way of stating this information.
We really think that My City deserves a pandemic legacy style rulebook where the new rules are stickered in and then crossed out or stickered over when they are no longer needed. So then you can just read through before each episode in order and find out what's in play. So just before we end, we just want to touch on the ending of My City. Whilst maybe not the giant culmination of everything you'd expect, the theme is a very pleasant one. So thematically, after the journey you've been on, it's a really lovely ending and nice aspect to focus on, even if episode 22 maybe introduces the toughest mechanism so far. Also, unlike some other legacy games, the game can be played after completion as the boards are double-sided, and you'll play a game set about midway through the campaign. And this is a really nice touch, even if it might get repetitive quite quickly.
Final thoughts. This is a game to get if you have a general love of board gaming. Obviously, if you're a person that only plays one super specific genre, then this won't be the thing to break you out of that. But for everyone else, the people who will play any game, as long as it catches their eye, this is for you. In this very, very reasonably priced box, you'll get a wonderfully relaxing experience that is totally unique.
Turning a tile laying game into a legacy experience is genius. And even better, if you don't like a chapter, it'll be out of your life in about 45 minutes. This game is super easy to get to the table, it's quick to set up, and it's quick to play, that it will be over all too quickly. If you enjoyed this video, we'd really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up and leave us a comment down below. Please feel free to ask us anything about the game. And also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel for regular board game reviews, usually under 15 minutes, always with a little hint of doggo.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.